Welcome to the From Foster to Blank podcast, where we're highlighting former foster youth who have discovered their passion in life and creating their own purpose by redefining what success means to them. It's almost like a Where Are They Now podcast. Within every single story, we will see different people highlight what inspired them to change the direction of their life and how they achieve their own goals by redefining what success is. The best part is everyone is going to have a different definition of what success is, and we get to learn from them. The other neat part is that every single one of these people are going to highlight what they do, and they're going to give advice on how they got there. This is an educational podcast for people that are like you and me, foster care kids, but we're going to see it from a different lens of positivity. So here we go.
Okay, so we're here, audio and visual. Oh, I just hit my glasses. That's fine. So we're just going to do all the mistakes and just let them in because I feel like that's a good conversation. So my hope and my desire through this podcast, From Foster to Blank, is to highlight foster youth who have found their own success, whatever that definition is for them. We were just talking about how on social media and in events or in different environments, we hear two things. Like the first thing is you have to tell us your trauma, or you have to share your story in the month of May so people know that you're a foster youth. Mm-hmm. And the other thing is we don't know where the foster youth are who are successful outside of actors and actresses. So my hope is by creating a space just to say, here are people who have made it through emotionally, mentally, physically, financially, or whatever, and they're willing to just share positive things. So there's going to be 3 questions that every person is going to get, and we're going to answer these and just kind of see where the conversation takes us. Mm-hmm. But my hope is just creating a space that's positive and uplifting and not always focusing on the past, because as we both have found, there's a lot of people who are just like, well, that's who you are, is you're just foster care. Like you are the foster care. And it's like, we are so much more than that. Our stories have developed so much more than that happened to us, that is in our past. Mm-hmm. But we may not mentally or emotionally have the ability to revisit that with every conversation. But we're so much more than what we went through. And we're human beings with careers and families and all of this other stuff. And that, yes, that happened to us, but our hope is to go from that to where we're at now and share some light in this internet web that tends to be sometimes really depressing and hard. And especially in May, it's very difficult to hear all of the stories over and over and over again. So hopefully we can provide some hope and light for people that might be still dealing with foster care as in themselves, as parents or as youth. So we're going to dig in. This is Mia. I met her on Instagram and I'm so excited that we're friends. So I'm going to ask 3 questions and then you get to answer them however you want. So the first thing is, what do you do?
Well, first I want to say thanks for having me. I'm so beyond excited for your podcast. And I can't wait to kind of hear other people's stories and perspectives. I'm so big on storytelling too. And I love hearing who people are and where they come from, as long as they're comfortable like sharing that. And I love that you're giving a platform to offer more than just kind of your past and what happened to you. Like, where are you today? Who are you today? So, like you mentioned, I am Mia. I am a licensed social worker here in New Jersey. But I like to say that I'm like a Jane of all trades. So I studied social work in undergrad. And then really decided, I was like, I want to get experience in the field before getting my master's, because that was one of the things in the program that I was a part of that our advisor was like, each and every one of you are meant to be a change agent in this world, and that the giftings that God has placed in you is not meant to be under a bowl, like to yourself. It's supposed to be for the world, right? Mm-hmm. And I always, and her name is Dr. Owasu, I always think about those words because they really helped shape kind of who I am today and opened up my mind to the idea that truly your past doesn't define your future, and there's so much more in life that can happen, that is going to happen. And so I have background in social work and working specifically in the adoption field. I've worked with expectant parents, or they call birth parents, first parents, adoptive parents, adoptees, like international, domestic infant, state older child adoption. Like when I say I've worked in every single like capacity, that is a lot of my experience. And then I decided to get my master's in social work as well, and was really looking into the clinical side, because fun fact, I just like to geek out over like neuroscience and just understanding human behavior. Why do we operate and function the way that we do? And it's so great today to see kind of where the field is with really providing education on trauma, because back when I was like in school, we were literally part of the first, like getting that information out there, educating our parents. And like, we talked about before we started recording how, some parents are kind of like exhausted about the conversation now, but just if we could see how far we've come and the importance of having these conversations, it's so that we can stop to look at the person in front of us and see, wait a second, maybe the behaviors and things that I'm seeing, it's not about me. It's not about how they feel about me, but it's like, how can I come alongside them? Because maybe they're struggling. Maybe there's something happening within them that they need someone who's going to be understanding, who is going to provide safety and connection, right? And so all of that to say, like, that has all like informed kind of who I am today. So currently I'm a therapist. I also work with one of our major insurance companies, specifically in New Jersey, it's called DCP&P, which is the Division of Child Protection and Permanency, also formerly DIFUS, DCF, whatever state you're in listening to this, the child welfare system. So, and the nice part about it is with the insurance company, we're mandated by the state of New Jersey to provide case management for any of our kiddos who are in foster care. And that's also for our kids who are adopted or part of KLG, which is kinship legal guardianship, or Maya, which is the Medicaid extension program when someone has aged out and they're 18 and decide to sign themselves out of foster care. They still get insurance coverage, and we offer that until they're 26 if they want the case management. So
Oh man, that's a lot. I love
a
that.
lot, I know.
I'm like, oh my God, geeking out. So psychology is like our thing. That's what my degree is in. And my undergrad was also in child and adolescent psychology. So absolutely, you're right. In 2009 to like 2020, there was not a lot of trauma-informed training. And I think that so many people are burned out with trauma-informed because it literally is just like, here's what trauma-informed is, and let me hit this on the head over and over and over and over again. But we don't really get to learn what to do with that trauma informed in an application sense. And there was I did a certification thing where this psychologist was talking about being certified as a trauma informed specialist. But he said, when you pull someone to their story, every single time you have a conversation with them, their brain goes from 100% functioning to 80% within that conversation. And it takes them about a week to get back to 100%. And I sat back and I was like, okay. And he goes, then I start to do it again the next week and say, let's relive your trauma again. And so you said something that, you said that actions are a response to something, and it's not always the person standing in front of them. Most of the time, it's just that is the reaction that they can get out. And I think that is such a big thing for anyone listening, is like, when someone is acting a specific way and it's not you, you have to say, this is a reaction to their environment. Something's going on. And this psychologist, he said, when we put kids in counseling and ask them to regulate their emotion, but we do not change the environment, we're asking them to be in control of their environment, versus it's the parents' or guardian's job to say, let's regulate the environment so that the child can regulate their emotion. They should not be looking at both as a child.
Yes.
And I think
Oh,
that is a huge thing we don't learn with trauma-informed training. I've never once heard someone say that. And so I was like, I've been in psychology for 13 years. That was the first time I heard about it. And I'm like, where was this dude when I was going through
when
this?
I was going through this.
He's been teaching since the 90s. And I was like, this guy, like, we need to be friends. But
Yes.
it's interesting that you said that, because it's like I was like, I want to make sure I say this, but you just like naturally went into it, and I'm like, but
Yes.
I think that is a big thing that we lose with most trauma-informed training, is that we don't understand the application side.
Yes. You know, what's interesting, because I'm currently a therapist now, and I've worked with families. And a lot of times my parents would be so frustrated, but I'm like, hey, the behaviors that you're seeing in front of you didn't magically or randomly appear out of nowhere. And Dr. Karen Purvis, I actually, like, oh my goodness, I geeked out. I was able to see her in person. Yes, when I tell you, and it was just as powerful in person as when you hear her trainings. And for those who are like, who's this? Who's Dr. Karen Purvis? She created the trust-based relational intervention model, which for me at the time was the first time that I saw an adult really get down to the understanding of a holistic approach of when you're working with children, youth, adolescents, and you're like, I have no idea what I'm doing. I feel ill-equipped. I'm seeing these breakdown in behaviors. How I want to help. How do I do this? Right. And she spoke in such a loving, maternal, nurturing, literally gave me the language that I was like, what you just said, where were you when I was going through this? And it was just like, that for me brought so much healing, because that was before I went to get my master's. And I remember sitting there and I was like, this is it. This is what people need to hear, and understand, one, the time that it takes to establish relationship. Like, it doesn't matter if you go to a kid and you can mean so well, like, I care for you. I'm so excited that you're here. I'm going to give you everything that you need to thrive. It doesn't matter because in their mind, they're like, yeah, my experience in my life has shown me otherwise. You might say these things, but I need to see the consistent behavior behind it.
And that
Right?
takes time.
So
And
much.
that's where I think, so I took in 5 of my siblings,
Mhm.
and that was a constant conversation. Like, I don't trust you. And it's not always that it was my fault,
Mhm.
but it was, well, my past. People said that to me before. Yeah, okay. When we would see that from other people, I was the same way, like all this stuff. But a lot of people would be like, trust me, trust me, trust me. And I'm like, everyone I have experienced has an agenda behind that word, trust me. It's the same word, like when people hear this is good for you. As a foster care youth, that was a dangerous phrase, because it was like, oh, this will be good for you. And it was like, I know what's good for me. That's not it. I know what trust means. You need to give me years to trust me, not just moments, not just a week and 2 weeks. And I think I have that struggle sometimes with building relationships, where I'm always like, where's the secret agenda? Like,
Where's the
because you're
agenda?
on guard. But
Yeah.
I love that, because and for people who don't know this person, what was her name again?
Dr. Karen Purvis.
And she did the relationship and like dynamic, where it's super important. And that's like, for us psychology people, this is like Disney World to us. Like, we're just like,
It really is.
but when healing happens through what we learn, it could be even something simple. It doesn't have to be a psychologist or a doctor or a counselor. But one of the things that I heard early on from a professor who did art was just like, you have the choice. You're 18 now. You couldn't control what happened to you in the past, but you can control from today on.
Right.
And I was like, that was not something I was told before. I was told, you just let life happen to you. You wait for people to accept you. You wait for people to invite you. You wait for this, and this. You don't ask, you don't go, you don't get. And I'm realizing every person, if we redefine success, everyone who is successful in their own ways have said, I had to make it happen. I had to get up, I had to go, but that wasn't easy. You know, it's not easy to do either one.
Right.
And so for learning, for us psychology people, we're always geeking out because it's just like there's healing in what we learn, but then we get to go teach others. And that's where the magic happens. Like, this is where it's like, hey, I can bring this back to parents and say, it took years for this little one or this teenager to feel like they couldn't trust people. It's not going to magically fix in the middle of the night. And then I believe there's research out there that says it takes twice as long for us to start to correct those kind of thoughts. We have 60,000 thoughts in a day. 90% of them are repetitive thoughts. And 90%, that means like, if we're always like, I can't trust you, I can't do this, that's 90% of my thought all day. So if I want to change that, it's going to take a long time to start redeveloping, reteaching, relearning what I need to do to move forward.
Right.
I love that. Okay, so let's move on to the second question. How do you define success?
Okay, so you asked this question and I was like, oh, I'm like, I can see how everyone will define success differently. For me, I think it's been a connection to peace. And success for me has been walking through my own healing and walking through a trusted like relationship with a therapist, because I have been to therapy a couple of times. And side note, I will always give this disclaimer, always look for the right fit for you. Not every therapist is going to fit your needs, and that's okay. So ask questions about who they are. They're like, get to know a little bit about them. They're, yes, the modality, what they practice, but really get an understanding of how they function within that therapeutic relationship, because therapy is only going to work if you feel safe. And I'm the kind of and all my clients will, you know, they know, and they kind of laugh. I'm like, listen, you have full permission to, when I bring up something, to say, I'm not ready for that yet. I'm like, that's okay. And I was like, and there are going to be times where something will come up that I may be like, we need to go here. So I'm going to gently walk through it with you, but it's only after we've established relationship, right? So why do I go into that? I think it is so important, especially if you have a background, a history of trauma, to give yourself the permission and the space to heal. What do I mean by that? What works for me may not necessarily work for you. And I have this thing that's called a toolkit that I geek out about that as well. Like, these are the things you're going to pull on that are going to help you come back to a place of safety, come back to a place of peace, right? Because when you're healing from trauma, there is something called Dr. Dan Siegel talks about the window of tolerance, right? Within your nervous system, that you are kind of trying to keep yourself in a place where you are regulated. And when you're healing, you're like stretching that little by little by little. Slow and steady wins the race. Like, there's a reason why that is, why that's said. So with success, I was like, I needed to go through a place of healing, because there were times where things would happen that I internalized or personalized that literally had nothing to do. And like with me, I created a whole narrative, and I'm like, wait a second, what just happened here? And it was because of my trauma, my struggling with feelings of unworthiness, struggling with feelings of like, is it even okay for me to sit at the table? I mean, if you met college Mia, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm sorry, like apologetic to even sit at like the table, versus who I am today. It was like, no, I get to walk fully in who I am. And I was made this way for a reason. And I get to show up when those doors open, when it's like looking, and like for me, it's also trusting God's plan for my life too, because it's really like for me, like I read scripture, I pray, and I'm like, God, where are you leading? What are you doing? And I've seen him just open up doors in ways that I'm like, there's no way I could have ever done that. Like, that wasn't me, right? And so just spiritually, like trusting the plan that he has. And that has brought me so much peace, like going back to that place of peace. And the other piece is you are you for a reason. The giftings that you have, your personhood, who you were made to be, it's there for a reason. You do not need to fit a different mold in order to show up as yourself. And so I truly believe that in order for you to walk in success, like it may look different from what anyone else has ever done. And give yourself permission that that's okay. That's okay if you are forging a completely different path than you have even seen. We need that, right? Yeah. Like talking about this podcast, and I'm like, I love that you're doing this because there's not a podcast out there that's talking about that. And let's be real, sometimes that probably feels super daunting. Like, oh my goodness, like, how is this going to work out? Like, there are all normal responses, like things that come up, but it doesn't mean you stop. You keep putting one foot in front of the other, right?
Yes. Okay. I want to unpack this a little bit. Sure. So first you said it's normal responses. And I think when we're in our trauma, we think they're crazy responses. We think we're abnormal. And once we worked through that, we go, no. Like my body is reacting this way because it's stressed. It feels unsafe. It feels insecure about something. And I need to work through those thoughts. You said you are you for a reason. We all have our own gifting. Yes. And I think too many times we don't get to explore that. I've worked in education for a long time, and our big thing is always just push people to a degree, and people start to go to educate to school to get a degree without a purpose, and they want to do like cosmetology, and they're in business for a bachelor's degree, which could connect at some point, but they're like, well, my passion is over here and I'm walking this way, and we're walking away from what we feel is our purpose. So we are gifted where we are for a reason. You're not crazy for wanting something different, but you said that like sometimes that means you have to go this way even when no one else has gone that way. And then we feel even like I always kind of feel like I'm going against the tide. And people are like, oh, you're here. You've made it overnight. And you're like, oh my God, look at the 13 years, 15 years that I went from, high school, college, me to me today. We're all so different, but it takes time. And you keep saying it takes time. Let it take time. And you're at that, when I first started counseling, shop around. Like, yes, amen. Shop around.
I'll give you an example. There was a job that I needed to, that I had, and they lost one of their therapists. And I'm not a fan of this when they're like, well, we just need someone to go in there. And it's just like, I'm just gonna put someone in there. For me, I'm just like, y'all, that's not like how this should work. It's supposed to be a safe therapeutic relationship. So I'm like, okay, I need to show up. And I'm actually grateful that it happened because it opened me up to a population that I never thought I would have worked with, but I ended up loving adolescent boys. Never in a million years did I think that I would be working within a group home setting, right? There was one kid, and here's the thing, for me as a therapist, you can curse, I'm not even like, you get to come as you are. Like I just feel that there needs to be safety there, right? He and I did not connect. When I would have family sessions with his mom, I'm like, it is okay if I am not the right fit for him. And she was like, oh my gosh, I felt so bad. I was like, absolutely not. I was like, I will always do my best to provide a safe space for him. But if he is not connecting with me, it is okay that you find someone who he will connect with, because the goal is healing. It's not about my ego. It's not about who I know who I am as a therapist. It is okay. And like the moment she had that permission, I remember seeing her like 9 months later, and we happened to be at a training. And she was like, oh my gosh, I was like, how are you guys? And she was like, Mia, we found a therapist and he's doing amazing. And I was like, I'm like, literally, I was like, I love this. And you could tell she was like relieved. I was like, I meant it when I said it is okay that I am not a good fit. And I have to share that because I'm like, I can give you all my success stories of my clients who like we connect. It's amazing. No, like you also need to hear that it is okay to encourage someone to go somewhere else to get what they need.
Yes, amen. So I get this imagery in my head and I want to share it because it's kind of funny, but I think it's like, this is the perfect way that I would describe this.
Mhm.
Your therapist is like a relationship.
Mhm.
Say that you're dating someone for 9 months and all of a sudden you wake up and it's a totally different person. Like it's not even the same guy or girl that you're dating. And you're like, who are you? This is how it is with relationships with your therapist is you can't whiplash someone and be like, here's a new person. Like that does damage to us. And we're just like, whoa, but it is a relationship and it's something that you can enter and exit at any point. And it's always disheartening for me because I'm gonna be honest, I went into counseling sessions and I was like, I got my ish together. I know what I'm doing. Like I'm studying psychology, so I know all the little tricks that people are trying to do to get me to open up. And I always said, like, I don't want to go into my past because I don't feel like that is affecting me. I feel like it's today. I feel like it's how I'm responding to situations. And I always got that pushback of, okay, 2-3 sessions in, you're fine. You don't need therapy. And I'm like, at that point, starting to break down and relieve myself of like this barrier of like, my defense mechanism is to be like, I got it all together because that is what I've been taught my whole life. So it's always really challenging, you know, for counselors listening, like give it time sometimes if someone's like that, but also too, like, I don't want to waste your time. But at the same time, if you start to see someone starting to open up, don't just call it a quit.
I actually just read a book and I'm like, oh, I need to give you the title of it.
Yes.
It said that it takes about 6 months for trust to be built within a therapeutic relationship.
And we don't say that. And we don't like, we tell people like if in 3 weeks or four sessions, you don't feel comfortable. If you have that gut feeling, leave. Absolutely. But once you get into that situation, let it develop in time. And one therapist, I was with her for probably about 6 months and amazing because she told me, because she recognized it up front. She'd been doing for a long time. So she was like, I already know. And I had said, you know, foster care background, horrible family background. And she said, she goes, okay, I need to give you time. And she said, there was one time I'm like, okay. And I was like ready, like week 5, I was ready to be like, okay, destroy all my defense mechanisms, take it all out. Let me word vomit to you. And she paused me in the middle of my word vomit. And she goes, you're doing what I call the onion. And I said, the what? Like, I was like, she goes, okay, have you ever cut an onion before? And I'm like, yeah. She goes, have you ever ripped one? And I'm like, no. She goes, when you cut one, it's nice and diced perfectly. But when you start to peel too quickly, it just ruins the other layers very fast. And your onion's really ugly. And it's really hard to start cutting down into the right shapes because you kind of ripped it apart. We don't want to do that with our emotions. We need to be able to build back into a coping mechanism that's healthy and then take down one that's not healthy. Because if we try to just take all your healthy coping or unhealthy coping mechanisms down, you are left exposed. And she goes, and this is where I see a lot of people run into relationships and friendships that are abusive. Because they're exposed or they're depressed and other things happen because they're exposed and there's no healthy mechanism to come back in and say, okay, at that point I had an eating disorder. I expressed my control through food and I was trying to just stop doing that and then stop trying to do the emotional spiral. And she goes, whoa. Let's deal with one first. Because you can't deal with all 5 of these. They're too big. Let's put something healthy in. Reward yourself with food, but don't skip the next meal. So she would put these little things in and I'm like, what are you doing? And I
think what you're speaking to too is why it's important to find a therapist who's a good fit is because you're trusting their clinical judgment as well. You're trusting that what they're observing and seeing that they are going to work with you gently and compassionately.
Versus one I had I'm not going to say the year. There was one I had, so like that might be too specific. Hope they're not watching. But there was one that I had within the first session and the second session, they showed up late, like by like 20 minutes, which instant anxiety for me because I'm on my lunch break. But then
the therapist showed up late.
The therapist showed up
yes.
like 20 minutes. Both sessions. But in the first session, I was diagnosed off the bat within 10 minutes of talking to her, PTSD, anxiety, depression, and 3 other things. Like
within 10 minutes of talking.
Within 10 minutes of talking. And I'm like,
by the way, side note, that can be a whole nother conversation.
It was too fast. I was
about
like,
I'm like, friend.
I was like, whoa. Like, I just felt like there was a difference of being spent, and this is why I bring this up. There's a difference between someone spending the time with you and then saying, hold on, like you said, like, I want you to trust my clinical diagnosis is that you're giving me an analogy of an onion, which she could have said something totally different compared to someone I did not shop around for and got into this conversation within 10 minutes of actually meeting her on my first session, being diagnosed with 6 different things. And then the next session being told, like, if you're not serious about your mental health, you can go find somebody else. And I'm like, okay, that I have never seen that big of an extreme before. And that was kind of, I personally stepped back and said, there's something else going on. But there are other times where it's very subtle things, like 6-8 weeks in, you're just not trying hard enough. If you just got this medication, and it's subtle things that sometimes will happen that you go, I don't want to go on a medication. And they're like, well, you need to. And it's like, these are the subtle things to the big things that we can come back and be like, my advice would always be go talk to another therapist just to see how you feel when you get that information. Shop around a little bit. But
I think people don't realize that they can shop around. That's the other part. It's just like, it's your care. It's your treatment. You know, you do get to pick up and see, like, is this person listening to me? Right. Even on that first meeting, like, are they cutting me off whenever I'm talking? Like, you know what I mean? Like, there are some things that you could really kind of pick up within that first, because we do free 15-minute consultations. It always goes over 15 minutes because I'm just like, you know, it's just like I want to make sure whatever questions you have, like, you have permission to ask them. You know, this is, again, your treatment, your care. But I think coming to a place of just realizing, especially hearing how that therapist, you know, first responded, you know, I would want to know, like, how long have they been in the field for? You know, what is there are certain things that I'm like, you can kind of go through to get a better understanding and then make a decision to say yes or no. And you don't have to feel bad about saying no to someone that really just isn't a good fit.
Absolutely.
You know?
I agree with that. All right. So the last question, if someone wanted to do what you do, what advice would you give them?
Take advantage of the resources around you, and hear me out. I also say this with a disclaimer because I also recognize that sometimes it's hard for us to really, like, see who are the mentors, who are the people who are really showing up around us, because can be hurt. There's so much that's kind of clouding that. But don't be afraid to experience and allow yourself, even if you're like, you're guarded and everything, that's okay. Be guarded, be real, and showing up kind of where you're at, but take advantage of the resources that are around you. Teenagers are kind of my favorite population to work with. Like, I even hate to say it that way. I'm just like, their ability to, like, see the world the way that they do. And, you know, like, sometimes they're making, like, decisions that you're like, no friend, no friend. Like, but you have to give them the space to kind of grow and mature, and, like, this is also part of their development, right? One of the things that can be really hard is that feeling of, I know what's better, right? And we're kind of at a different stage in life where we're just like, well, we've lived life a little bit with that as well, so we know, like, there's some wisdom that comes with that, right? So for anyone who is also, like, you know, fostering, caring for teens, like, extend grace, extend compassion, like, give them the space to, like, encourage them to experience resources and to connect with different people, especially mentorship. I think mentorship is the biggest, for me, reason why I can show up today as who I am. And I've seen mentorship happen in different areas of my life, where people have taken the time to really share what's helped them grow, really pour into, and maybe even see things within me that I've needed to work on and call that out lovingly. And it's given me the opportunity to be honest about it and say, oh, okay. Because none of us are perfect. That's the other piece. Like when you are trying to figure out this path, like what does this look like, right? For me, it's what's funny is if you would have told me years ago I would be a social worker, I would have said, heck no, there is absolutely no way. I don't care, I don't want it. I'm like, and a lot of it has to do with I did not want to be defined by my past, because it becomes easy to be like, oh well, that makes sense, you grew up in foster care, you want to help out. And no, I didn't want to. No, I wanted to be a photographer, I wanted to be in the arts, I wanted to be, and it's funny because those parts show up today as well in other outlets, where I get to host a podcast for one of this online creative community that I love, right? And there are things like you don't have to box yourself in. So what advice would I give you? Don't box yourself in. Allow yourself to learn what safety is. I will say that. What good relationship is, like learn to define like those qualities. And this is like a whole nother conversation for us to have, what that means, what that looks like, and connect yourself with the people who are really doing their best to show up and pour into and really mentor and give you that safe space to grow, to flourish. Because like we said, these things take time. And sometimes we're like, why am I not on chapter 10? And I feel like chapter 1 is going so slow. I'm on the 5th page. Why can't I be at page 100? Like, what is going on? Right? Yes. And it's like, no, you're going through the process that you're supposed to, like keep one foot in front of the other.
So, okay, it's really funny that you say that, because that's actually kind of a chapter in the book that I wrote, where it's like, what is it, like same chapter, same doggone book, where it's like, I'm so tired of rewriting the same things or like going through the same things. And sometimes what I found is that sometimes we go through the same thing, but with a different ability this time around. Before, we didn't have the information or the ability to go through it the same way that we did in the past. So this time it gets to be a little different. It might look the same, but we get to make different choices at that point. But I love that you said, like, no one's perfect. Don't box yourself in, and find mentors and healthy relationships. So I'm going to have you back because I want you to dig into what that healthy relationship is. What does that look like? Because we're always told the red flags, but we're not told the green flags. Like, this is a good relationship. This is what you should be looking for. And I think that is something that doesn't matter. Anyone who's experienced any sort of trauma, I think we don't get to talk about that enough. I have only ever heard conversations on red flags. So it's always like the don't do all these things, but it's like, what do I do?
What then do I do?
What can we do?
Got it.
Look good.
Now what?
Now what? So we tend to focus and lean on that. But I really love that. Really help people who really help us grow. And then finding the resources. So we'll plug a couple of the ones that we know. There are some school resources when you go to college, and there's also organizations that actually help with different things. What are some of the organizations or resources that you have tapped into that you would say, look into these to see if your state or school or anyone has for you?
So, and here's the part for anyone listening, like, it's sometimes so hard to compile all the resources because depending on the state that you're in, like, there's going to be different resources all throughout. So in New Jersey, I will say, I was, so in college, I went to school in New York. I actually worked for the tutoring center, and I was actually connected with my supervisor at that time. Like, she really poured into us as a staff. And I know the work ethic that I have today, who I am, how I show up today is because I connected with her. So it's just like, if you're in school, for example, in college, find the resources, find the, like, if it's within your school program, the dean, your writing center, things like that. Like, you can connect with the people who will help you network, will help you grow, will help you mature in other skills, not just for your resume, but how you show up for work. Like there are also ones that help with interviewing skills, like your college campus resources for that, like go for that for the job training. There's also, we have what's called NJ Arch here. NJ Arch, you can go on the website and it's broken up by county in New Jersey. Like they offer different support groups within the adoption like community. There's scholarship opportunities. Like I remember when I went to grad school, I saw that there was one specifically for former foster youth. And I was like, the worst that can happen is they say no. And I actually ended up winning that scholarship. So it's just like there are things that like you can look up, and it sometimes it takes researching with it. If you're a part of an agency, within your agency, there are typically different community providers who are helping connect you with different resources. Really like, and you know, we've heard of Jamie Finn, like Foster the Family. Like she's literally, when I look at what she's doing, she's another person that I'm like, I like ball my eyes because I'm just like, I love Jamie that you're showing up in this community the way that you are, because it is, and she'll say like, I'm no one special. It doesn't take someone special. But I was like, no, but you really are. Like, and what you're doing really is like, you can feel the love, the genuineness, everything. So within that, and then the other piece I will say, which what I love what you're doing is connect with former foster youth, like hear their stories too. Like I have loved getting to see and know like so many different former like foster youth and just see where they're at. And I'm like, I don't like, if this is terrible, I was like, I don't really care about like what happened back there. I do, don't get me wrong, for your personhood, I do, but I am cheering you on when I'm seeing you show up. Like I remember you had a story and you were like something major, and I was like, yes, like literally I'm like
You
cheering.
messaged me, you're like, what is it? And I was like, oh my God, I have to tell you.
So excited. Right. And I'm just like, you know, there is something so beautiful and unique within our own community, because I think we we understand what it's like to navigate what we have. And so when we show up and see like all these amazing things also happening, it's like, hey, let's focus on that too. Like that is just as important as sharing your story.
Absolutely. And I think you, when you highlighted the resources, a lot of us focus on the money resources and not the resources that develop us as our skills, our soft skills. Interviewing, resume building, tutoring to get our classes done. And I think sometimes when we're not plugged into an educational institution, we think that there are no resources. So I love that you pointed out like, hey, the county also has some of those resources for training, job searching, and things like that. And I think we don't know those things because those are not things that we're really plugged into. A lot of us are just told, go to college and figure it out then. And it's like, there are so many resources out there and people out there. Shout out to Jamie, because we both stalk her. I mean, follow her on Instagram. She's great. And like Laura, you can look her up, Foster the Parent. Her name's Laura. She's also really a great resource.
Yes.
She has everything on there already. So I'm always, you want resources?
She's another one who I'm like, her role playing, I'm like, Laura, Laura, I needed a little warning there on that one.
I know. I know.
Good though. I'm like, when she's like preparing a kid for meeting their like for their first family visit and checking with them, and I'm just like, I love you.
Like how, like where were you guys when we were in there? Like there's just so much, because it's good to have those resources, because it's healing too, to be like, there are not all these monster foster parents out there. There are great foster parents out there, but let's plug more foster parents into these groups. But also like, and that's kind of comes back full circle. It's where are we plugging the foster youth into? And that's where we're hoping to create this space. And for you guys, please follow all of us on Instagram and Facebook, but like I'll be tagging our handles so that you have someone to follow. If you want to go to counseling or photography or art, Mia is a great resource for that. And it's like, she can help point you into those directions. And if you want to be a nerd like me, like, I don't know what I do. I do a lot of things, but I love that in the beginning you said, I'm a Jane of all trades. I say I'm a jack of all trades. I don't care if it's guy or girl. I'm like, I love it. And I
love
do, because what you start to look at is all the things that we did in the past. Every little nitty gritty job that we thought didn't matter, it actually comes full circle. And it, like, I don't know, like all the stuff I used to do when I worked at like Del Taco and the mall at Macy's, like shout out to these people, maybe they'll sponsor us. I don't know. I don't know how that works. Works, but like all of those things, like the customer service aspect, but also like the computer stuff, it all comes full circle. And there are so many times that I sit here and I start laughing and I'm like, I swore that would never be a skill that I would use, and look who's using it, because life is funny that way.
Nothing is ever wasted.
Nothing is ever wasted. I love that. And I think what we should call this podcast, I mean, it's going to still be called Foster to Blink, but it's like, where are they now?
Love that. I love
like, it's going to be our little hashtag, where are they now?
Mhm.
That's going to be fun. All right. So we will have you back. I really want to talk through those healthy relationships, because I think that's super important for anyone who's experienced a bad one, just to kind of know what to look for, because we are always told about those red flags.
Yes.
But we hope you guys enjoyed this. If you guys have questions, you guys can leave them in the comments. You can also reach directly out to Mia or myself. But please reach out, like follow, and we'll list the books that she mentioned in the description. So if you want to look at them, you absolutely can. And we'll list Laura and Jamie in there as well, to say, go follow these people, just so you guys have more resources. But if you have questions, let us know and we'll go from there. Have a great day, you guys.
We want to take a moment to thank our sponsor, Foster Greatness. We equip foster youth by connecting communities and empowering individuals on their journey. We provide workforce development, master classes, travel abroad experiences, and individual and community support for foster communities. If you're interested in learning more, please visit fostergreatness.co. Thanks for joining us.